And so, it begins. Dark were the skies and chill was the wind as the land was covered in a veil of malice. Across the hill did ride a dread army of the night, cloaked in mist and fog, prepared to rain down death and destruction upon the land. And the people did cry out for a saviour, a noble soul to save them from their impending demise. Just as it seemed all was lost, in strode a mighty hero, clad in shivering metal from head to toe. Wielding a terrible broadsword, he did cleave his foes in two, smashing their ranks asunder with righteous fury. And when the day was done and the enemy strewn across the fields in pieces, the people did turn to the warrior and say, "We shall name this day in your honor. Speak unto us your wisdom." The warrior said one word that day: epic.
One man, one Murloc, one giant angry badger. This is Blue Plz. It begins now. Yes, indeed, folks. Welcome to Blue Plz here on CynicalBrit.com for the 26th of Feb 2010. It is 8 p.m. GMT. It's 3 p.m. in the East. In other places, it would be other heretical times. We can't condone them. Absolutely not. We shall hunt them down. We shall burn them and purge them with fire. Yes, what we are coming up for you in the show today. Many great things. A chance for you to win a StarCraft 2 beta key. This is for the podcast listeners as well as the live. You've got about a week to enter this one. I will tell you how shortly. You're going to have to hang on to that one. Plus, live interview, folks. Kevin Michael Johnson, he's the producer of a forthcoming documentary called The Raid. You might have heard of it if you've been hanging around on Tank Spot. They're involved in that. And we will give you the opportunity to hear what he has to say a little bit later on the show in a live interview. You'll also be able to ask questions in the IRC channel. That's irc.quakenet.org. # or pound Cynical Brit. Alternatively, webchat.quakenet... Try that again. webchat.quakenet.org. Punch Cynical Brit in there and get involved. Go hang around if you're listening live. Great content coming as well. Lots of questions to be asked, including how does one teach an entitled casual? You'll be finding out a little bit later on in the show. Bit of a story of redemption, maybe with a happy ending. Also, if I get the time, an analysis of the Plague Wing. A guild has finally gotten back on its feet, and we went and cleared the Plague Wing, killed Putricide, did all the good stuff. I'll be telling you about that a little bit later on in the show. Now, I'd love to talk to you about the new Blizzard developer chat, but yet again, they, funnily enough, scheduled it a few hours after this show ends. I can't imagine why that would be. They'll get it next week. We shall see. So... apparently you guys seem to like the Zerg Please thing that I did last week. So I'll have another one, and we'll sort the sound quality out this time. Got a brand new audio setup, shouldn't have too many issues this time around. And we'll do that at the end of the show. Those of you listening via podcast will get Zerg Please as a separate file. Those of you listening live, well, you can just hang around. And we'll be doing a commentary as I decide to go in for one of my first placement games. I haven't done any placement games yet in the leagues. So I'm going to go in there, I'm going to play it, I'm going to commentate on just how terrible I am. If you want to see how terrible I am, we've got a rather successful video series going on at the moment. Tweeted and Facebooked and promoted by Blizzard themselves. It's I Suck at StarCraft 2, which you can find on YouTube as well as my page on CynicalBrit.com. Go watch them if you want to see an absolute newbie perspective of StarCraft 2 from someone that barely ever played the original. Indeed. The gradual ascension from absolutely terrible to slightly less terrible. We'll see how that one goes. Right, we've got a ton of stuff to get through today, so let's just get right on with it.
Mail time! That sounds like it's mail time. Here's the mail.
It never fails.
It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes,
I want to wail.
Yes, Yes, indeed, it's time for the mail, as you might have imagined. So, here's one. Now, let's go and have a look at this one. There's some interesting mail that I got over the week. That's always nice. I don't like it when I get dull, boring, horrible mail. Yes, not pleasant at all. This one comes from Nicholas Bouquet. A bit flowery, perhaps. And he says this. He is the Guildmaster of the Dread Army on Lothar, US. Hey TB, I'm a few weeks behind still on Blue Plz, shame on you. But I wanted to chime in on the situation with Insidia. Your commentary highlighted a problem I've always had with Blizz and all MMO publishers, and that's enforcement of their policies. Quite simply, there's no appeal process, and a bunch of computer programmers tend to not understand basic things like due process. Furthermore, as we've seen, you give someone a little power and it's just asking to be abused. See Kiki Jiki's forum ban a few years ago. Yes, I remember that, in fact. That wasn't too pleasant at all for anyone concerned. So, he then goes on and says, I know for a fact that Activision Blizzard has several big law firms on retainer for a variety of matters, including the one that I work for in the paralegal department. Why not ask one of those firms to serve as an appeals board? That's from Mortium. That's a good point, really, isn't it? Well, I think the answer to that one is quite simply this. Cost. You've got a tiny minority of players that are affected by these terrible decisions. Insidia, of course, being one group of those players. That's, 25 people were affected by this. And of course, there's some people that got angry about it, but the vast majority of people don't care. And then you've got a rather substantial group of people who are rather misanthropic when it comes to the community and just like to see other people fail. Yes, people like that exist, and it's kind of pathetic. However, you just have to deal with that. So, I don't think that Blizzard would ever do that. And to be fair, you don't need a legal department to provide this kind of information. It just needs an independent board. It needs people who are assigned specifically, who are not involved with the GM department in any way, shape or form. They're also not involved in making the rules. It's called separation of powers. You should be aware of this if you're involved in law in any way. You've got the legislature, you've got the executive, and you've got the judiciary. The legislature make the rules, the executive enforce the rules, and the judiciary, well, the judiciary are the guys who judge whether or not the laws are fair and when to apply them. Effectively, that's your very basic way of describing it. You've got your legislature in the form of the guys who make the policy. You've got your executive, who are the GMs. So, where's your judges? Well, you don't have any. Therein lies the problem. Yeah, an appeals board for this kind of thing would be a good idea, and then that appeals board could pass down judgment and could pass down some kind of binding precedent, which could be used by the GMs. They can look through the big book of stuff, and it'll say in there, well, back in Blizz versus Leet Guy 420, we agreed that he was banned for this reason and the enforcement of the rules were correct. Or, Insidia versus Blizzard, they were banned for this reason, but we do not agree with the enforcement. Here's the interpretation of this, and this is what you've got to follow. Yeah, it could work, honestly, if you can get an independent board of people together in order to sort that out. I think it becomes more and more important as things go along that MMOs are starting to acquire a certain value. Of stuff in game, items, things like that, they acquire value. The top-end guilds, there's money involved, there's sponsorship involved. So it becomes a corporate issue. It becomes something a little bit more important than little Jimmy didn't get to play WoW today. So yeah, at that point, I think you do need some kind of watchdog. You do need some kind of accountability for the GMs, and not just have them handing out bans willy-nilly with absolutely no way to appeal against it. It's not good, honestly. I don't think it's good at all. And yeah, I would agree, it needs to be sorted out, although I wouldn't waste a law firm's time with it. All you need is a couple of independent developers or just Blizzard staff members. Hell, even players, as long as they're peer-reviewed. Right, we've got a couple of other emails here. We've got one from Mike, a.k.a. GDJ. Try again. Yeah, let's rewind it slightly. Yep. A.k.a. DJ Timekiller, and he says this. Hello, hated TB. Thank you. A couple of days ago, MMO Champion posted news about Exodus being the first US guild to kill heroic putricide. Now, given the debacle of the exploited Yogg Saron kill, I was wondering if you thought that any achievement that the Exodus guild does from this point forward would be seen as tainted. That's a good one, isn't it? It's entirely possible. I think that all guilds deserve the benefit of the doubt after a certain point. been a while since that happened. And guilds can make mistakes at the end of the day. Not all of them are malicious. Some of them are just not thinking straight and didn't quite think through their actions. Everyone makes a mistake from time to time, so I think that the player base absolutely will tar them with this is illegitimate. But you got to bear in mind the player base is generally incredibly stupid and is going to tar any endgame guild with this. Like, Insidia makes a mistake and suddenly the top 200 guilds in the world are all cheaters, even if they aren't. You know, even if Insidia isn't. And of course, we're not going to repeat that argument, but hey, we know for a fact that Exodus did cheat. They admitted it pretty much freely, waved the flag around and said, hey, we're awesome, then got banned for it. And, well, you know, that was thoroughly deserved. But I don't think it's fair to say that every kill after that of theirs is tainted and involved hacks. You know, guilds can learn their lesson. At the end of the day, if there's no proof of it, then you can't make those stupid accusations. Innocent until proven guilty. That's not going to stop the mewling masses and the populist nonsense, but do we really pay attention to those people? I certainly hope not. Generally speaking, they're incredibly foolish. That would be my simple answer to that, to be honest. There's not an awful lot more to say on it. So I'm not going to. Next email from Blood Guzzler. He's a level 89 elf rogue on Nazgrel US. And I can hear you guys in the chat room chomping at the bit to find out how to win a BlizzCon key. I'll tell you at the end of this segment. Patience, patience, patience. And yes, the BlizzCon key will give you access to StarCraft 2. So, this one comes from Fangs the Wolf, and he says, Dear the host of shows. Yes, the host of shows. So, he says maybe raids and dungeons have stood the test of time due to the excitement that it brought the players. I've seen 80s group up weekly for such raids as AQ and Karazhan. As we rapidly approach the next expansion, do you think there will be any Wrath of the Lich King material that level 80s and 90s will come back to in the future? Also, if a raid is rehashed or heavily altered, does the nostalgia factor disappear? Interesting question, really. It's funny because there's a lot of stuff that makes no sense, like going back to Karazhan and going back to AQ. Why do you go back to AQ20? There was like one good boss in that entire instance. I can understand AQ40. A couple of nice things there. Twins was pretty challenging at the time. That's quite iconic. Cthulhu was quite iconic. Iconic. Get it? Oh, God. Anyway. TBC, you've got people going back to Black Temple and Sunwell. Sunwell because it was really hard, quote-unquote, and Black Temple because it has an iconic boss in it. It's got Illidan. You don't see people going back to SSC and TK very often. You don't see them going back to Zoloman all that often. But Wrath the Lich King, Ulduar, honestly. They would go back to Ulduar, I think. Algernon and Yogg Saron 0 and Mimiron Firefighter. They're very iconic fights that I think have earned something of a reputation, and some players do like to go back at higher level and just ruffle stomp it, and they feel good about that. I don't see any problem with that, honestly, as long as it's not happening in the current encounters. As regards to ICC, yeah, Putricide and Lich King, definitely. We'll definitely go and see Lich King, because, again, massive boss. It's the same as Illidan. Illidan might not have been an amazing fight, but he was an iconic character, and hence the reason that people wanted to go back there. So they keep going back to see Illidan and see the lore, see the voice acting and the scripted stuff. And, yeah, they'll do that. As regards to anything else, well, they're certainly not going back to VOA, garbage heap that it is. I can't see them going back to Naxxramas. They already did that. And there's no reason now. And as regards to other stuff, well, TOC, no. What are they going to see? A Nubarak? They can already see that in a Heroic, and to be fair, a Nubarak isn't that great a fight anyway. But it is interesting. The second question, of course, is whether or not, if a raid is altered, the nostalgia factor disappears. It could, really, but I think the best example of that is to look at Naxxramas. Where was the nostalgia factor in there? Well, the nostalgia factor was washed away because they ruined what made Naxxramas good in the first place. Was that when I think of Naxxramas, I think of Knights of Wiping on really hard 40-man bosses. I don't think of ruffle stomping the entire instance and getting handed a bunch of epics. I don't think of farming badges in Nax. No, that's not what I think of at all. So, for me, the nostalgia factor of Naxxramas was ruined for me at that point, and that point alone. Now, if you go back to an instance and do the same thing, Anixia's got the same problem. Anixia became a joke. It wasn't even that hard to begin with, but when you first played Anixia, you'd done no other raiding whatsoever. So it became an iconic fight for you. Even though it wasn't all that hard, it did set down a lot of raiding ground rules. You know, it set out the concept of a three-phasing counter. It set out the concept of aggro dumps, aggro wipes. There is no aggro reset. It spawned a great meme. It set out the idea of loads and loads of ads and the controlling of said ads. It set out the mechanic of if you don't get out of the way of this, you are dead. Now, that's a lot of really important stuff that's been incorporated into raiding since then. So that is a really iconic fight, which is why a lot of us were incredibly upset when they brought it back and said, here's a loot pinata for you to beat on that you can 5-man. That's upsetting. That was not the case, at least when Onyxia was first there. Obviously, at the end of it, when people were extremely powered up, Onyxia was killed by tiny, tiny groups. But we didn't expect that to happen so early on with Wrath when it was brought back in. It wasn't a celebration of raiding, it was really taking a dump on all that raiding represented. Which, funnily enough, is most of Wrath, actually. As opposed to Old War and some parts of ICC, yeah, it's a massive, stonking dump on everything that raiding's achieved over the past 5 years. Not good at all. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I said I would tell you how to win a StarCraft 2 beta key. Now, you've got to be patient for this one, because I'm announcing the winner on next week's show. That's to give the podcast listeners time to do this. So, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. You help out Blue Plz, and we help out you with the beta key. So, this is what we want you to do. If you wish to win a StarCraft 2 beta key, you have to get onto iTunes and leave a review on Blue Plz. Any review. I'm not asking for positive reviews, I'm asking for honest reviews. So, licking my boots and all that nonsense sycophancy that you know I hate is not going to get you anywhere. Now, once you've done that, take a screenshot of your review, either, just once you've finished typing it, because it takes a little while to appear on the site. Take a screenshot of your review and email it to themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com. Take a screenshot with Paint, just save it as a JPEG, email it over, and I will randomly choose someone out of the hat on next week's show. So you go do that, go help out Blue Plz, and we will help you out with the beta key. Right, ladies and gentlemen, would you like to hear some music for the brand new Finn Troll album? I certainly would. This only came out a few days ago. It goes by the name of Den Frusnamunen. I'll be right back after this, folks, to tell you about a redeemed entitled casual. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast, an archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed to comply with copyright law. If you'd like to hear the music, tune into the live stream on Fridays at 8 p.m. GMT. That's 3 p.m. EST, only on cynicalbrit.com. And now for the latest in raiding news. A union of all the bosses in Northrend is protesting outside of Azeroth's highest court, demanding that a huge number of guilds be banned for what they called leet hacks. We spoke to the leader of the group, Mr. Putricide, who had this to say. Terrible news, everyone! We're getting steamrolled on a weekly basis by thousands of guilds, and it's all because of UGT Ventrilo servers. Crystal clear, low-latency voice-over IP allows guilds to communicate quickly and effectively, so they can down bosses with ease.
Sir?
What is it, Rodface?
We have a UGT server too, sir! We got it from UGT-servers.com!
What? Why wasn't I invited?
Well, Arthur said you were too cheery, and he's concerned that your malleable goo will stain the carpet.
Your guild is a community, and communities want to stay in touch. Whether you're in an intense arena match, an epic raid, or just hanging out and shooting the breeze, you need an always-on Ventrilo server from UGT-servers.com. Crystal clear quality, low latency, and of course, low prices. UGT-servers.com are so good, they should be considered an exploit. Get yours today. Yes, indeed, folks. You are listening to Blue Plz here on the CynicalBrit.com with myself, TotalBiscuit. Ah, yes, right. Let's get on with the content, shall we? Sounds like a good plan. Sounds like a good idea. So, I have a story to tell you. You seem to like these kind of things. So, let me tell you a story. It's about an entitled casual. And this entitled casual is a member of our forum community, or... It's unfair to call him entitled casual now, because it's entirely possible that he may change his ways. And indeed he has, by the looks of it. So, it's a story. This is a story all about how a casual's DPS got flipped, turned upside down. So, I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there, while I tell you about the rogue with 1.5k DPS. Dun 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 dun. Da, 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 da. In West Ogrimmar, born and raised. In Heroics is where he spent most of his days, chilling out, maxing, relaxing all cool, and doing terrible DPS outside of the school, when a couple of raiders who were up to no good started making trouble in his neighborhood. He got in one little forum war, and his mum got scared and said, "You're moving with your auntie and uncle onto cynicalbrit.com. He whispered for a mount, and when he came near, the license plate said your DPS is terrible, and there were dice in the mirror. If anything, I could say that this cab was rare, but I thought, nah, forget it. Let's learn to play." Something along those lines. I actually made that up on the spot. Yeah, I am a lyrical genius. What can I say? So, right. It's not exactly unfair to name this guy because he's on the forums. Yeah, this guy goes by the name of Doom Extreme. He's on the Cynical Brit forums. You can go read his thread. It's called Fix Your DPS. Got 175 replies there. Big thread. And this is a story of redemption, ladies and gentlemen. This is a story of a guy who started off badly and got into a bunch of fights with me and the forum community and then mended his ways for the good and betterment of everybody. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. So, here we go. Let's have a look at this. So, here's his first post. You can go and have a look at it with me. Go read along with TotalBiscuit. Yes, I should do a children's series. Read along with the terrible StarCraft 2 player. Once upon a time, there was a noob who knew absolutely nothing about StarCraft 2. Yeah, let's not do that. Actually, let's do that at some point. That would be a great idea. So, I've got to say this. The StarCraft 2 videos have been the most successful troll ever. You know why? Because of beta envy. There are people that don't have the beta that rage about not having the beta. Yep, the vast majority of you that don't have the beta are entirely sane individuals. They're like, oh, well, I'll get in on the next wave or win a key or whatever. Hey, it's just a beta. Which, again, it is. It's just a beta. But there's the tiny minority of people that have gone absolutely psychotic over this beta. And if they see anyone ever post a video where they are not absolute 110% pro skills, mad skills, you know, we're talking like grubby level here, then they will rage about this guy getting into the beta. We had one guy that said he was physically nauseous. I kid you not, physically nauseous because someone who was quite new to the game got into the beta before he did. It was the funniest thing. Oh, seriously, the amount of aneurysms these idiots must be having is hilarious. So, thanks Blizzard for perpetuating my troll videos. Very good. Anyway, let's get back on topic, shall we? Doom Extreme posts this. He says, "Now I'm annoyed. I've just been in my 7th heroic, and this is what's happened. We fight to the first boss, and just before we fight, they use the DPS add-on to tell who is doing how much DPS. They then proceed to kick those whose DPS is under 1.5k. Before they do so, they tell us, fix our DPS. Oh man, I'm so sick of it now. I seriously need TB to tell me whether this is true or false, because honestly, I've done so many heroic dungeons and we never wipe. Healer never even uses more than half his mana, and my DPS is 1.2k. I think this is ridiculous." Yes, ridiculous, which is, in fact, absolutely fantastic for making frilly undergarments. Ridiculous. Buy it today. "My friend has just stopped playing this game because he can never get into a group. I have to agree with them. It's just downright rude. But still, TotalBiscuit, tell me, is it really a sin to do a heroic with less than 1.5k DPS? And the answer is absolutely it is. And you're terrible if you do that." So, he made the first mistake of asking me a question in a public forum. If you wanted to ask me a question, you could just email me the question. But he didn't. He posted it in a public forum, which indicates that he wants to discuss it with other members of the community. So, the community comes back, and they dig up his armory profile, and they start providing suggestions as to how to better himself. You know, how to do better DPS, how to get everything fixed and sorted out, how not to suck as a player. They provide links to tank spot stuff, EJ stuff, videos, they provide optimal rotations, say what he should sort his gear out. You know, he was using weapons in completely the wrong hands, his spec was all over the place, his rotation was absolutely broken, he had no idea about the priority system. Yeah, this is why he wasn't doing very good DPS. So for a couple of pages, my guys suggest things, and they do so in an incredibly polite manner, honestly. I'm really proud of my community for that. And he just gets more and more frustrated and eventually starts raging at the community. Yeah, he throws this back in their face and say that everyone's an elitist basement dweller and that I believe the quote was something along the lines of, yeah, this is your spec and your ideas. Where in this is the room to play my character? And guys try to explain to him that this idea of individuality within WoW only extends so far, and there comes a point when, in order to not suck, you have to be good at the game. Yeah? You have to work out what's going on, and you need to sort out your spec, sort out your rotation, and DPS or heal or tank in a certain manner. You can't just throw away the rules and start over again. But he didn't seem to get that, and a lot of raging went on, and I had a long Twitter conversation with this guy, and he got extremely angry with me, threw a bunch of insults, but hey, I correctly guessed that he was a teenager, and no offense to teenagers, but a lot of you tend to be pretty damn impetuous, yeah? Would that be unfair to say, my teenage listeners, that you don't really care all that much about other people's opinions, that perhaps you think yours is the most important? Well, that's fine, you know, everyone was like that. I was a total douchebag when I was a teenager. Now I'm just a different kind of douchebag, a more effective, more well-marketed douchebag. But back then, yeah, I was a complete knobend, to be quite frank. So, I get it, really. I understand. I've been there before. I'm not trying to relate to you cool kids. Yeah, I'm down with it, yo, and so forth. But I understand, really, that nobody really wants to be told how to play the game. But there comes a point where if you ask this kind of question, especially on the Blue Plz forum of all places, it's like you ask this question on the EJ forum, what do you think is going to happen? Huh? They might provide you advice, but they're most likely just going to flame you. And you want to know why they're going to flame you? It's the same mistake that all entitled casuals make. Yeah? And that mistake is simply ignoring the resources in question and begging for help. Yeah? Assuming that everyone around them is a glorified walking help desk and that they must provide the information on demand because I pay my $15 a month, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, those are the kind of people we're dealing with here. Google is alien. Indeed, one must not besmirch oneself. No, absolutely not, no. Must not besmirch oneself by finding the Google myself. Oh, no, I have minions for that. Yes, quite. It's pretty bad, unfortunately. I don't know why people get this idea into their heads where they believe that everything should be handed to them on a silver damn platter. But it happens. People are like this. So, if you posted that kind of thing on the EJ forums, you would get absolutely reamed. If you posted it on the Tank Spot forums, you would probably get reamed. Post it on MMO Champion, you'd probably get reamed, and their forum community isn't even all that great. Post it on the WoW forums, you might get some help, but you'll get other people flaming you just for not using the resources. You want to know who's going to flame you? Me. Me and people like me. Because we see Google, and we see EJ, and Wowhead, and WowWiki, and TankSpot, and all those other great sites that are really easy to find. You know, the argument has to be made that there is a certain moral duty that good players have to share their knowledge. And you want to know why that is? It's because it benefits the human race as a whole. This point was made in the thread, and it's extremely valid. That if humankind kept all their developments and all their knowledge to themselves, we would never have gotten anywhere. Yeah? Someone made the example of, what if the first guys who came up with fire never shared it with anyone else? We'd be kind of screwed, am I right? Yes, we'd have all frozen to death. The species wouldn't have gotten anywhere. But the responsibility begins and ends at making that information accessible. Yeah? We're talking about basic instruction and strategy and tactics and rotations and things like that. It's not keeping those secret, it's putting them in a place where people can read and learn. And those places exist. Peer-reviewed articles on Elitist Jerks, on TankSpot, on WowWiki, places like that give you all of this information. It's available at the touch of a button. That is the way of things. That's where it ends. You are under no responsibility at all to instruct a random guy in how to play the game. Why? Because it's time-consuming, and time is an incredibly precious resource. It's like, if someone in a heroic was doing awful DPS, am I obliged to tell them how to fix it? No. Absolutely not. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to kick him. I'm going to initiate a vote kick. I will tell them why. I will say, you are doing awful DPS and you need to fix it. I will do that. I will happily say that, but that is as far as I will go. I'm not going to spend 20 minutes tutoring this guy in basic mechanics. Why should I? It's my game time. Why should anyone? It's their free time. You know, you've got to applaud the people like EJ that actually put this stuff up and use their time to help other people. But you should not expect it to be waited on hand and foot. And This philosophy, this way of thinking is poison. And you want to know why it's poison? Because it extends far, far further than that. It does. Honestly, it really does. It extends way, way further than simply asking for help on a forum. These are the same kind of people that make demands of Blizzard based upon the fact that they pay $15 a month. I am a casual player. I have job, school, family, girlfriend, wife, grandparents, dog, whatever. Whatever excuse they've come up with for not being any good at the game. You've got your two kinds of casual players. You've got your actual casual players. I'm a casual player. I only play 7 hours a week. That's barely anything in comparison to others. It's funny how a lot of these entitled casuals are like, well, I only play 20 hours a week and I've got no time to do anything or learn to get better. So Blizzard, please nerf the game. I play 7 hours a week. I'm vastly ahead of you. Please explain this. It's the same deal that we've got with people like Insidia. The big raiders are the ones that play the least because they are that damn good. They get stuff on farm status and they clear things faster. Obviously, during progression, that's a different matter entirely. But when they're on farm status, they get everything sorted out way faster than other people. The idea that a poop-socking player, as they call it, a player that plays an awful lot, is somehow some kind of inferior person is ridiculous. Players that don't play an awful lot are already catered to. There is a marked difference between people that don't play a lot and people who are just bad at the game and use not playing a lot as an excuse. Those people are poison to the community. They are poison to the game. Because if they ever gather in sufficient numbers and Blizzard gets the metrics and believes that they have to cater to that group because if they don't, they're going to lose subscription money, then we get damaging things like Wrath of the Lich King. Wrath of the Lich King is a direct result of people sucking. No, really, it is. What's my justification? Direct quote from Blizzard. TBC raiding was too hard and not everyone got to do it. That's unfair, so we're going to nerf it. We're going to make easier raids. What happened? Wrath raids. Constant bouts of nerfs. Naxxramas. The defilement of Naxxramas. Quite ironic, really, considering that it was defiled to begin with. Things like TOC, an absolute joke. A lot of nerfs to Icecrown. A lot of subpar bosses in there as well. Tier 9 for running heroics. Nonsense like that. You know, frost badges for killing a Nubrican. Frost badges for killing a boss that is, quite frankly, the equivalent of a 5-man dungeon. The new one in VOA. Tier 10. Free Tier 10 right here. Just play the lotto. It's pretty bad, honestly, and all of this is the result of entitled casual whining, but here's the nice thing about it. This story has a happy ending, because eventually, after battling and battling and battling, this guy decides, yes, he's going to listen. And my community got him to listen, and you know what happened? His DPS went up from 1.2k to 3.2k. And you know what? I don't want to kick someone out of my 5-man that does 3.2k. That is reasonable. 1.2, not reasonable. The problem is getting through to people like this, because you'll see it on the forums, people are indignant. Yeah? They are on the internet, therefore their opinion is enshrined in solid gold, laced with platinum, and held upon a spire for all to see. That's their opinion. They believe it to be infallible, which is of course incredibly wrong. And a lot of people have this idea that their opinion can't be wrong. No. Absolutely not. Great quote was simply this. You are entitled to your own opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts. Your DPS sucks. Objective fact. You are doing it wrong. Objective fact. We can fix it if you let us, but we'd prefer that you go and fix it yourself by using the resources that are available to you. How difficult is it to get through to people? Well, as you can see, 18 pages of what it took to get through to one guy. Yeah, I'm glad that he started to listen, and I can start to respect him again as a person. And yeah, he's young, so I get the indignance, but there are a lot of adults that have exactly the same problem. They simply believe that they are right no matter what, and they've got to learn. Is it up to the players? No, I think the players have provided all they can at this point. The resources are out there. It's up to Blizzard to really push and set a standard that players have to get to, otherwise they don't get to see everything. That's the thing. If you give it to them, then there is no incentive to improve. You want one good reason why giving out free Tier 9 is a terrible idea? Why giving out free Frost badges is a terrible idea? Because players won't get better. They have no incentive to do so because they're being handed their stuff on a silver platter, and you never learn that way. My name is TotalBiscuit. You are listening to Blue Plz here on CynicalBrit.com. We'll be back after the break with a live interview. Oh yes, with Kevin Michaels, Johnson. He's got some great stuff to tell us today. Here is some Daniel Tidwell. It's Ken's Heavy Hadouken. Enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Blue Plz on cynicalbrit.com, aka Broken Please, with myself, TotalBiscuit. Got a very special guest for you in the virtual Broken Studio today. Goes by the name of Kevin Michael Johnson. He is the lead producer on a brand new documentary that's going to be coming out fairly soon, we hope. It goes by the name of The Raid. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, TB. It's good to be here.
Excellent. Fantastic. So let's get some questions out. And what we'll tell you guys is that you can ask some questions of your own in the IRC channel. Drop us a line. irc.quakenet.org. That's hash or pound Cynical Brit. Alternatively, I'll open up the email box as well. Drop me an email to themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com if you have a question for this fellow. And of course, we'll be plugging the website and giving you a link to the video as it stands at the moment at the end of the show. So, Kevin, let's talk a little bit about yourself specifically. Give us a little bit of an introduction. Who is Kevin Michael Johnson?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm an actor by passion. Actually, I live here in New York City. I've been pursuing that for the last couple years. And it's been good. Done a lot of, shows, a lot of stage productions, short films, commercials, that type of stuff. Actor by passion, but someone thoroughly interested and intrigued by technology and the way it affects social culture, which has certainly led me to this particular project right here. And I'm pretty excited about it.
Excellent. Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the production and, more accurately, your motivation for this. Why create The Raid?
Yeah, as I was saying, I'm thoroughly fascinated by technology and the way that it impacts the social world around us. And certainly we're seeing, after having the internet upon us for the last decade or so, however long it's been now, it's had a huge impact. Certainly in the way we do business, but also in the way we entertain ourselves. And what's the reason for the film? I think there's, as we're getting more and more involved and more into these sort of social experiences online, the generation prior to, I should say, the video game generation, just the distance and the gap between the understanding of that particular generation and the generation that's coming after it is just widening ever so vastly. So I think this film is an attempt to create some level of common ground between a generation that might not fully understand exactly what's happening in an experience like an MMO, one for instance like World of Warcraft. Trying to establish a platform for a dialogue that portrays an experience, elaborates on why that experience is, number one, interesting, number two, entertaining, and even important in the future of the world and business and so forth. So, yeah, a desire to basically create a clear picture of an experience that is often hidden and not easily understood by someone who hasn't had an experience with it.
Indeed, that's a rather lofty goal there. How do you intend to achieve that exactly? Obviously, putting it online seems to me like it might be a little bit of preaching to the choir, don't you think?
Yeah, you're right. It is a bit of a hurdle. In fact, figuring out how to get that in front of a community that doesn't spend their time online, that really is tricky. And for me, of course, the lofty goal and the grand goal would be to somehow be able to get this run at some point on either network television or in some sort of theatrical release, some sort of bigger version of what I'm trying to do. But how do we accomplish it? How do we create that story? I think we do that in a couple of ways. One is actually showing the experience from within the game engine, ideally, showing the excitement of it, the energy of it, trying to capture it from all angles. So that means from within the game engine, but also through live cameras while people are playing, through recording of event conversation, coordination and timing of a raid at work, and of course editing that in such a way that it's palatable and interesting. And then along with that, sitting with raiders, people who do this and dedicate their time toward this type of thing, sitting with them and asking them questions about, why do they prioritize this experience the way they do? How exactly does it fit within their real lives, like work and family? What do they value about the experience? Essentially, what is the value of a digital achievement for them? Why is it important in their lives? Essentially, What is the social world experience like for them? So yeah, sitting with them in one-on-one interviews, and then along with sitting with players, ideally sitting with people who are a little more, I guess you would call them meta thinkers on MMOs in general and the future of gaming. Sitting with some people who are experts in that field and asking the bigger questions like, what will this look like in 10 years? Why is it important in today's world? How will it change? Asking some of those bigger picture questions, which, would hopefully, again, stir some dialogue or some intrigue on the matter.
Excellent. So, you mentioned the social value of raiding there. Do you feel that there even is a social value when your players aren't actually in the same room?
Gosh, TB, I think that's a terrific question. And in some ways, I think, even as a director of this film, is one I'm asking myself. And I think even is one that our culture is asking at the moment, which is why I think I find this film so provocative, is it's a new thing for us. I mean, it's not that new given the internet, but, coming to a broader grasp of its meaning is kind of new. Yes, we're seeing people saying that, yes, this is a social experience. I spend, 30 hours a week with this particular group of people. I know where they live. I know their families. I know their struggles. I know, I can tell you when their birthdays are. We're seeing these types of experiences where people have intimate knowledge, lengthy, extensive relationships with individuals over time through the internet, yet without any kind of physical interaction. And those to me are provocative questions. What is the value of a relationship like that? I don't know that I know the answer to those questions. I think that's one our culture in particular is still trying to figure out as a whole. I think there certainly are meaningful. You see, especially with rating, you see social responsibility. You have a time to be there, to show up, and if you don't show up, this group of people they're kind of counting on you. So you see a lot of very complicated social tasks and interactions at work in an experience like this. So yeah, I mean, my instinct is to say absolutely, there's incredible value here. Lasting friendships are built through this. It's a new type of experience and it's a new type of thing. So certainly it's understandable that it might come under some sort of criticism or critical eye by the greater world. But again, I think it's just something we need to dialogue more about and kind of come to a new understanding of what exactly, this type of social relationship is. And so, yeah, I think those are huge questions that I'd like to look at with this film, for sure.
Fantastic. So you mentioned an interesting point that I think a lot of our listeners may have experienced at some point. That, yes, raiding does involve a degree of social responsibility and particularly personal schedule. Yeah? You have to dedicate a certain amount of time at a certain point in time in order to successfully raid. Now, a vast swathe of people do not understand that. Our teenage listeners have probably had their mother tell them to get off. It's like, no, you can't do that. But Mom, I've got to be here at this time. That kind of nonsense. And then, maybe spouses, partners, girlfriends just don't understand it. Other friends in real life don't understand why you're sitting at a computer at a certain time at night for a couple of hours. Why do you think it's so difficult for the general public to get their head around the fact that you have to show up at a certain time in order to take part in a group activity? I mean, are these the same kind of people that show up 3 hours late for a dinner date or whatever, and then wonder why everybody's upset? What's with that?
Yeah, I think that general populace that you're talking about, it's this populace that doesn't really know what this experience is. They look at an experience like this as quote unquote a video game, which I think they still feel like video games have a lot of the old Nintendo, turn it on, pause it, that type of thing. And again, I think they see this experience as that, and it certainly is more than that. And again, I think that's just a part of a sense of ignorance there, that they don't quite understand that there are potentially 24 other people on the other end of that computer counting on their whoever this person is to be there. And yeah, I think that's just something that needs to be communicated, and again, appropriately prioritized by the individual in question. These are again how you, as everyone in their life, prioritizes their experiences and their time is certainly each person's prerogative. But I think the fact that that greater community doesn't fully grasp that this is a communal experience, that it is a communal, coordinated, exciting, entertaining, you could even call it some type of sport, I guess you could say, experience that's happening. It's a lot less than just playing Super Mario Brothers. You can't really put it on pause. It's a lot more coordinated and orchestrated than that. So, yeah, absolutely.
So, we've touched upon the fact that raiding is somewhat confusing to the general population at this point, that the vast majority of them do not understand it. Now, you mentioned that you wanted to show a lot of what was going on in-game. Now, this is a bit more of a filmmaker's question for you. How exactly do you intend to show that experience to a uneducated viewer in a way that they can possibly understand and comprehend visually?
Yeah, that's a huge part of this film, and one that I think is, at the moment, probably the most challenging, is trying to orchestrate and execute both two different captures in the game. The cinematic capture, one that actually can easily express and portray the epic feeling of what's going on in a raid as if you were watching a movie. And then the other would be, of course, footage from someone's UI, user interface, so watching them, their actual UI at work. So you're having a juxtaposition of both of those. Now, the ability to capture that and do everything else that I'm trying to accomplish is the complicated one, and certainly does take a level of technology and computer processing and, an elite level of technology to make that happen flawlessly and yet still not compromise someone's raiding experience. And so that currently is a challenge that we're trying to overcome and trying to process right now. Of course, the dream of the filmmaker in me would be one that says, man, wouldn't it be great if I could have some kind of autonomous sort of observer mode where I could literally film this raid at work from inside the instance, inside the game engine, and not compromise any raiders' role in the raid or their lag or their any of that. I could actually just capture it from a cinematic perspective from within the game as a free-floating kind of camera point. That would be a dream, and of course, that's one that that having that come about is a little tricky. It takes
yes, it can be done. Unfortunately, yeah. Blizzard rather frowns on the way that is done. It's very unfortunate. I think that it could be a relatively reasonable spectator sport. We've seen how popular raiding streams can be. Thousands upon thousands of people. See TankSpot, who you've been cooperating through all of this, and we'll ask a couple of questions about that a little bit later. We've got some great listener questions surrounding your interaction with TankSpot. Huge amount of people have watched these videos. We're talking about TankSpot videos that are upwards of 500,000 views. That's an absurd number when you think about it. So, what have you been most surprised by so far in the process of creating this movie?
Oh gosh, TB, I think the thing that's most surprised me is the absolute support and interest that exists out there for something like this to take place. I've been, ever since I launched this sort of grassroots fundraising program, which we will probably talk about in a little bit.
But we will.
Ever since I launched this,
don't worry.
Ever since I launched this little fundraising thing, I've just been bombarded by incredible enthusiasm, people desiring to help in whatever way, offering the support of their guild, offering interviews. Come check out what we're doing. Just an incredible outcry of support for this effort, and to me, that's number one. It's incredibly encouraging as an artist or as someone trying to make something happen. Just to feel that support is huge. But then it's also, I think, affirming that for me that this type of dialogue is truly needed. And I'll get incredible emails from people that say, explaining their particular story and why they're really excited that something like this would come about because it would create a better dialogue between this particular aspect in their life. And I think it's a timely piece. I think it's appropriate, and I think it's even something that a lot of people in the world are crying out for to some degree. I mean, just some new sense of dialogue on the subject that can bring about an awareness, a better understanding.
Excellent.
I should say.
Fantastic. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with Well, the end of my questions at the start of yours. You're listening to Blue Plz here on CynicalBrit.com with our special guest in the studio, Kevin Michael Johnson. We'll be right back after this, folks. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast, an archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed to comply with copyright law. If you'd like to hear the music, tune into the live stream on Fridays at 8 p.m. GMT. That's 3 p.m. EST, only on CynicalBrit.com. You're listening to Blue Plz here on CynicalBrit.com with myself, TotalBiscuit, and our very special guest, Kevin Michael Johnson. Yes,
hello again.
Indeed. We have yet more questions. We're not letting you go just yet. So We'll ask you the last few questions that I've got, and then going to turn it over to the audience. We've got a couple more minutes, folks, if you have a question. We've got a bunch to go through already, so you better make it quick. Email themurloc@gmail.com or send me a PM in the IRC channel, irc.quakenet.org, # or #CynicalBrit. So, here's a nice broad stroke question for you. Do you ever think that there will be a wide acceptance of MMO gaming within the general population?
Oh gosh, I think that is an intriguing question, and again, one that I certainly don't know. I have a full answer on. One that I think this documentary is hoping to probe a little bit more. I think it's certainly going to become a wider spread experience. We're even seeing the growth and incredibly huge, surprising numbers come out of games like out of social networks like Facebook. You know, these little social games like Farmville, et cetera, et cetera. We're seeing more and more people engaging in activities like that. Which, sure, they're not rating. They're not as complicated or as involved as that. But what you're seeing is a growing awareness of socialized gaming happening within a broader audience. Maybe you'd call it a more casual audience. I'm not sure. But the vocabulary is growing within a wider world for this type of experience to happen. So I'm certain that it's the climate for this is going to be growing in its warmth. People are doing it more often and engaging in it more often, and I'm certainly sure it's going to become a huge part of our cultural vocabulary in the future. Again, why focus on rating? I think it's a provocative and exciting subject to ask some of these deeper questions. I think it will have a huge impact on our future. It will be the way we entertain ourselves in the future, and the way we experience community from within a broader, more global, entertainment world. I should say, yeah.
Fantastic. Right, so before we go on to the listener questions, there is an issue, I believe, an issue of funding for this particular video. Now, making good videos costs money, ladies and gentlemen. This might be a foreign concept to some of you. However, when you're traveling around and you've got a lot of equipment and you've got a lot of man-hours being put into something like this, then money is required. So, how much did you say you needed exactly to complete the movie?
Yeah, so let me give you a little background. When I launched this initial project, I basically said, okay, I want to create a short film that can capture the full essence of what I see in a full-length production. So I said, well, how can I do that the cheapest way possible, and still involve the quality that I desire? And I, worked this out, and I said, with $12,000, I'll be able to produce the quality of the short film that I want, and be able to get the interviews, like you said, travel to the locations I need to interview the individuals that I really feel like have a place in this piece. $12,000. I started that out on Kickstarter. It's been about almost 2 months of fundraising. We're sitting at about $9,000 right now, which is just tremendous, even farther along than I thought we'd be. But the way Kickstarter works is you set your goal. You say, hey, I have a dream. That dream will require this amount of money. And you say, I have this amount of time to raise that money. I chose 3 months. And if you raise or meet your goal by that 3 months, when that 3 months ends, hooray, you have it and you set to work. However, if you don't reach your goal, all of that, all the donations you had received up until the conclusion of your fundraising period is given back to the givers. And the reason that Kickstarter does that is, they want to make sure that your vision is able to be successful with the budget that you intended. And, and then your donators... Yeah, and that your donators aren't given, a half version of what it is you initially envisioned. So yeah, so we're shooting for $12,000 by I guess we have about 40 days left, something like that. And anyways, that site is linked through our main site, which is jointherade.com. And you can check that out. We have our current interview video up on the main video on that page. And we also have donor awards for the different tiers of donations. So, if you give $10, you get this particular award, and then, you can see all those tiers laid out on the page at jointherade.com.
Indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, so we've done a bit of fundraising in the past, remember? We raised over $4,000 to make sure that the fantastic WoW Nerdcore rap star's cat got the surgery that she needed. So I think we can manage this. What do you think? If you think that we can raise the $3,000 to get this movie on the go, then I would like you to let us know in the IRC channel. Let us know as loud as humanly possible. So this is the sound of clicking keys, folks. This is the sound of me going to tinyurl.com/theraidmovie. And I am clicking the backing button right here. And those two button presses there were for $10. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. But how many listeners do we have? We were the most popular WoW show on iTunes in the UK last week. We are in the top 25 on the US. We have tens of thousands of listeners. Are you telling me that tens of thousands of listeners, tens of thousands of generous listeners that believe in the value of a video like this cannot raise a measly $3,000? Are you chicken? Is that your problem, ladies and gentlemen? I think that you can raise that money. I think that you can raise this money incredibly fast. So I'm going to start us off with a mere $10. All we need is another 300 of you guys to do exactly the same. 300 out of tens of thousands. How easy is that? Just donate as much as you can, or as little as you can. There's benefits to it. You get donor status on TankSpot, in fact, if you donate a certain amount. TankSpot are helping out with this. So head on over, tinyurl.com/theraidmovie. I've just donated my $10. Why don't you go do it? You go fund a project. Go see the results of this. And, of course, you get your name in the credits.
That's right.
It's a good cause, folks. I expect this to be sorted out by next week. And if it's not, ladies and gentlemen, you will meet the worst form of wrath you can ever imagine. Indeed. Now, I would have some kind of bet on saying I will sing Britney Spears if we don't get there, but that won't work. Like, okay, let's put this out right here. I will sing, ladies and gentlemen, a parody version of a Britney Spears track live on the air next week, only on cynicalbrit.com, if you fulfill that goal by next week. Pledge, right out there. There you go.
That's awesome.
I'm
definitely tuning in for that one.
Yes, as will everyone. Oh, my credibility. Right. We've got some listener questions. Let's get on with it. So let's start off with some from the IRC right here. Easy one for you right here. It's from Natona, and he asks, and a couple of people asked this, when is the estimated release of this movie?
Yeah, that's a great question. Part of that's going to depend on, well, number one, the completion of our fundraising, but also on how we can arrange some of these interviews. But given that, I would certainly say sometime this summer. It wouldn't take us long to get it put together and out once we have all the footage captured. But so the fundraising ends on April 9th, and even if we achieve our goal, we still have to wait for that period to take place, just because that's the way Kickstarter does their stuff. April 9th, that will conclude, and we'll set to work ideally on just getting those interviews done, capturing the footage we need with the guild that we're working with, and hopefully we'll have it finished before the end of the summer. That would be my goal. Okay, so will you be interviewing anyone from the corporate side of gaming? After all, gaming is a business at the end of the day. That's a question from Kamada in the IRC. Yeah, that's a terrific question. You know, my goal would be to have some Blizzard people in on this film and to be interviewed specifically because, I mean, the film is particularly about WoW Raiders. It's not necessarily about World of Warcraft, as I had mentioned before. It's definitely about the bigger MMO picture and the social experience of what's happening in something like World of Warcraft. But the vehicle through which we're using to bring about that conversation is certainly WoW raiding. So yeah, I would love to have sit-down interviews, and indeed I'm working on that with people from Blizzard or other such corporate entities. Because MMO gaming is huge business. It's massive, and to leave that part out of the conversation would certainly be ignorant on my part. So yeah, that's certainly something we're working on.
Absolutely fantastic. So, got a question here that brings into the tank spot. We want to talk about the tank spot. Everyone wants to talk about the tank spot, apparently. Got a couple of questions here. So, this one's from Jay Guzzi, 2008, and he says, how was working with the tank spot crew, and do you get to sit in on their raids and such?
Oh man, tank spot is terrific. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know if this film would have legs if it wasn't for tank spot. I've been around that community for a while, and I've known Ciderhelm for a while. And it's just such a terrific place. Very supportive, very educational, as you've mentioned already on the show. Just a real warm community. And if you are out there and you're listening and you haven't experienced the donor forums, it really is a super community of people. Very kind and certainly interested in raiding, interested in raiding at the highest level, and figuring out how to help and educate people do that. To do that easily. And so yeah, love Tank Spot, love the community there, love the people there. What was the other question? Have I ever sat in on the raids? I have had some experience with some of the films on Tank Spot. Actually, I actually personally used to raid with Eventide back in the day, and it's been a while since I raided with them. I haven't actually been playing in a while, but I did a little bit of raiding with Eventide and raided with Ciderhelm, and I've actually been involved with or at least been filmed in a couple of the earlier videos back in the day.
So Holly's got a question here, and she says, sure. I would think a question I'd like answered is how receptive the WoW community that you have approached has been. She's found that the general stereotype for a raider is an elitist jerk and almost snobbish attitude. So did you find that, or did you find a kind of welcoming community, or something in between?
Yeah, I've every individual I've talked to about this and even approached, to ask about an interview, they've been thoroughly interested and wanted to help out. I haven't found any resistance from the raiding community or the gaming community at all. If anything, just felt fully embraced. And and that's people from all different types. Like the first interview video we put out, I had Fame from. He currently raids with Might, but he raided with Premonition and Vodka and Drow. Like, this is someone who's been, he's been in the top guilds in the world, at least in the U.S. And, he's, such a super kind guy. I mean, you can even see it in the interview. Very thoughtful and super excited about the documentary. And even there are other members from Might that are currently helping out with trying to get some cinematic footage and stuff like that. So, if anything, I've just felt fully embraced by the hardcore side of the WoW world. But then also, I'm currently working on a promotional video that will feature female raiders, and I've done one interview already, and I'm planning to do 2 more this weekend, and hopefully have a little promo video out in the next week or so. And that's been really, really cool. Just the energy and excitement surrounding that. I get emails, people saying, we're really excited to see that video on female raiders. And so that's going to be fun. Hopefully I'll be able to meet people's expectations for this little video. But so I don't know. I hope I'm answering the question, but felt fully embraced and certainly haven't been turned off by the hardcore raiding world, and if anything, I felt really embraced by them in this project.
Fantastic. This question has come in from a number of people, and they ask, how long do you intend the video to actually be at the end?
Oh gosh, I initially had thought it was going to be shorter than I know it's going to be. It's going to end up being longer than I expect. I have a feeling, just because I'm pretty passionate about the topic and trying to get a lot of people involved with it. So, I had initially speculated that it would be a pretty short film, maybe around 20 minutes, something like that. But I'm certain it's going to be over a half hour, if anything, probably more, given the amount of footage and the guild that I'm following and trying to get, all the webcam and cinematic footage in there. It's going to be longer than I expect. But over a half hour, probably something like that.
Excellent. A quick and dirty question. Any plan to interview the guy from the Anixia wipe video? More dots now.
I don't know. Hadn't thought specifically about interviewing him, but
I wonder why.
We're open to suggestions, but
well, it'll be M-rated if you did, I think.
Yeah, but no, I hadn't specifically thought about interviewing him.
Well, there you go. That's the answer to that one. Sorry, disappointment, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
No elixir wipe guy. That's probably for the best when you think about it. Fantastic. One last question here,
sure.
And then we'll wrap it up for the day. This is from Azier, and he says, how do you plan on advertising this to the general public and getting it outside of gaming communities?
Yeah, I've had a couple film sites reach out to me about this film topic. There are a couple sites that basically are ways to promote short films or film projects, and they're sites that a lot of producers will frequent and looking at new work that's under progress and in pre-production, and basically you have your own little website on some of these greater film sites, and you can promote your ideas, and that would ideally be somewhere I can put this short film and work on bringing about some awareness from bigger sources of funding to try to get a feature-length film made about the topic. Also, we would be looking at trying to put it in some film festivals. Theoretically, we'd have to find the right ones that we feel like it would fit with. But yeah, running it as a documentary and in some film festivals, and hopefully, again, raise some awareness that way. And then just networking. I have a network of contacts here in New York City, and we'll be shopping it around there. And there's a bunch of people involved in the project from across the country, and ideally they'd be able to get it to their contacts. And this whole thing has kind of been born about through word of mouth and the internet kind of network happening. So I'm certain it'll find its place through something like that. Just spreading the word.
Fantastic. So. Right. Well, we are out of time for this particular interview. Kevin, thank you ever so much for coming to talk to us today.
Yeah, absolutely, TB. Thank you for having me, and thanks to the listeners for being here.
No problem at all. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Mr. Kevin Michael Johnson in the IRC channel. And go check out his site, tinyurl.com/The Raid Movie. I expect that meter filled in 7 days' time. Get to it! Get to it now. Go watch some Cars or something. Do some physical activity. It's good for you. Right, I'm going to play some fantastic music from Louverté. Right now, it's Innes Mona. I'll be right back after this to tell you a bit about the Plague Wing and how Putricide died horribly under the blades and mages of our guild. Enjoy. You are listening to the podcast, an archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed to comply with copyright law. If you'd like to hear the music, tune into the live stream on Fridays at 8 p.m. GMT. That's 3 p.m. EST, only on cynicalbrit.com. You are listening to Blue Plz here on cynicalbrit.com with myself, TotalBiscuit. Yes, you are. That is just the way of it. There is no choice in the matter. You cannot escape. You cannot get away. Deal with it. Right, I want to talk about ICC, because the guild had a few issues, that being Dark with the Skies, our 10-man raiding guild on Mazrigo Hordeside EU. We lost not one, but 2 paladins! Yeah, it's terrifying. We actually managed to lose a bunch of paladins. I don't know how that happened, honestly. It's like, weirdly, just like, hey, paladins have disappeared. That's really awkward, isn't it? But yeah, we lost a bunch of paladins, and that wasn't too great. But we managed to get a new healer and get everything sorted out, and as well as getting another paladin for bench work, and we got going again. Now, we'd been trapped on Rotface for the simple reason that we hadn't had a proper raid together. We didn't have a main healer, so we couldn't keep the tank alive. Obviously, everything went to hell. So we got a new healer, and we killed Rotface, and then we killed Festagut, and then we killed Putricide, and then we killed the Blood Princes, and then for the last 10 minutes of the raid, we bashed our head against Blood Queen. Not bad for a night's progress, quite frankly. That was pretty good. I want to talk a little bit about the Plague Wing of ICC, and I want to analyse it and just, is it up to anything? Because I gave you the impressions the first week of ICC when I cleared 4 bosses. I talked a lot about the things that were there, and I think the assessment that I came to was it was pretty good. There's a lot of nice kind of nostalgia, really, to be honest, coming from the fact that the raids themselves were basic. Yeah, and they used the same kind of mechanics that we've seen for ages, and a lot of them did remind me of other raids that I had done in the past. You know, things like Lord Marigar just felt like a really classic fight, something that was way, way behind the times. You know, it was old. It used old-style mechanics. I mean, it's Leothorus crossed with a bit of Archimond in there, let's be honest, as well as High Overlord Nagentus. Yeah, that was the cross. That was the little hybrid. It's like, we have taken 3 fights from the previous expansion, mashed them all together, and there you go. A lot of it felt like that, until, of course, got to the Airship Battle, which is nothing like that. And then you go back to Sourfang, which has an interesting new mechanic in it. And then you go on from there. So, Sourfang was the first real test for the guild. It didn't take all that long. It took us maybe a night of wipes to get that sorted out. But, yeah, we killed him. And then we moved on, and, of course, we didn't really have a lot of an opportunity to kill Rotface, and we finally managed to do it. So I want to talk about the Plague Ring. So let's have a look at Rotface. So Rotface was the first one that we did, which arguably was a mistake, because that's not the easy order. Yeah, the easy order is left, right, middle. Yeah, you can't get in the middle until you kill left and right. Left is Festagut, right is Rotface, and there's 2 annoying dog mini-bosses in between them. Hell, even the dog mini-boss on the left is easier than the dog mini-boss on the right. Maybe they just wanted people to do it in that order, but of course when you give people a choice, they're evidently going to run straight into the hard guys and wipe, and that's okay. So, let me talk about Rotface. Rotface is a really, really solid encounter, as in terms of the challenge that it presents to a relatively average raid, as well as the mechanics involved. Yeah. So what have you got on Rotface? You've got kiting, you've got a lot of movement. Yeah, dodging a conal-based attack requires a lot of situational awareness, and you'll be surprised actually how many people fail at this. And indeed, our guild failed way too many times at moving out of the way of the spray, because it wasn't obvious where, at least on the ground or anything, where it was actually going to go. You know when you read the description that it's like a 30-degree cone or whatever in front of it, but it's about observing which way he's facing. And you know what? I don't think a lot of raiders actually have that kind of observational skill these days. I think that's just something that Wrath of the Lich King has done. It's like, you've got to look at where he goes. I remember how many freaking raiders failed on the gauntlet in Thorim. Remember how many? I can bet that someone in your guild got hit repeatedly by those fire things. You want to know why? Because you had to actually observe the enemy and see which direction he was going to shoot in. And funnily enough, that's something that is a little bit different from just relying on deadly boss mods all the time. Having to actually look and be situationally aware instead of staring at bars and grid is a skill I think that is lost now on a lot of people. So, yeah, that screwed us over a couple of times until I slapped my raiders around and said, what the hell are you doing? Pay attention. Just run 5 feet that way. It's really not that hard. Kiting. Yeah, kiting was pretty interesting. And the mechanic the main mechanic of this fight involves the spawning of a ooze. And this ooze, the first ooze has to be kited around, and then the second ooze has to be kited to the first ooze, and they will merge together to form a big ooze, which then has to be kited by somebody, and the off-tank, that's their dedicated job. So we had a Death Knight doing it, which is generally a pretty good choice. And you kite the big ooze around, and every time someone gets the infection debuff, they have to run to the big ooze, but not too close, because if it runs too close, you die from AoE damage, and that would suck. Run in there, get dispelled, which will spawn an ooze, and then make them merge together. And when the oozes reach a critical mass, they will explode and fire ooze all over the room. And if you stand in it, you generally die horribly. Now, to make this more interesting, the Professor Putricide floods quadrants of the room with poison gas, which will basically kill you horribly if you call it the slime pipe as it happens. Good news, everyone! The slime is flowing again! That's the effete British version, incidentally. You can see Putricide sitting in his armchair, rocking backwards and forwards, supping some Earl Grey on a fine summer's afternoon. Yes. Terrifying, isn't it? It's the Murloc. Yeah, it really is the Murloc, isn't it, when you come to think of it? Good news, everyone! The slime is flaring again! Ha terrifying. That would be the best raid boss. I would pay big money, Blizzard. Do it. Make the Murloc raid boss. You know you want to. Right. So, the quadrants get flooded with this crap, and if your off-tank is running through it too much, chances are he's going to end up dying, and if anyone accidentally stands in it, that's a lot of damage being dealt. So you've got that, you've got the explosion, and you've got a 30 or so % enrage to cap that all off. It's a fight based around movement, and I tend to find, in my experience, that fights overly based around movement really screw people over, because people get tunnel vision, and they just like, oh, I must do optimum damage. You want to know how much of a battle it was to get some of my members to switch out their Ice Walker or their attack power boot enchants for Tuskar's Vitality? It's like, I'd show them the math and say, look, seriously, the 8% extra movement increase actually increases your DPS in the long run on most encounters. For God's sake, switch out to Tuskar's Vitality. It'll let you outrun the oozers. It will make sure you are moving less. It makes perfect sense, but yeah, you get a lot of resistance to that. I think, again, people get a bunch of crazy tunnel vision, and they must do optimum DPS, they must do optimum healing, and they can't do that if they move, so they're just going to eat the damage, eat the oozers, run in the wrong place. It's crazy. But it's good, honestly. I think a lot of subpar guilds are really going to run into a brick wall with that fight. The involvement of each individual raid member, particularly in 10-man mode, in this particular encounter, is actually quite high. You've got to move, and that's something a lot of people just aren't used to. You've effectively got to kite, which is, again, something that people aren't really used to. It's good. I like that encounter. It's a lot of fun. Probably one of my favourite encounters so far, to be quite honest. Now, Festiga, unfortunately, doesn't really... It's okay, but it doesn't really reach that level of achievement that Rot faces. It's not as hard, for one thing, and it's based more on statistics than actually moving around an awful lot. There is a movement element to it. So here's what happens with Festiga. Festiga will occasionally spawn 2 spores. This is in 10-man mode. And these spores provide an explosive inoculation against a poison gas cloud that he belches out at some point. So you're constantly taking raid damage from this stuff, and he's also firing out something which requires you to be spaced out. This is his, quote, clever mechanic. His clever mechanic is, well, in order to be properly inoculated against my big kill-everything attack, you have to stand close to someone who has a spore on them. However, if you do that the entire fight, you end up getting an kind of explosive vomiting debuff, which causes massive area of effect damage. So you've got to be spaced out, and then you've got to move in for this. Now, the only real difficulty of this fight, except for the challenge on the healers, who have to frequently switch in certain phases of the fight between damage to the raid and damage to the tank, is the fact that these spores can end up spawning on random members. So you could end up getting 2 in the melee group. Now, they only cover about 5 people each with the inoculation buff. So if the guy in the melee group gets it and another guy in the melee group gets it, one has got to run outside to an area where the ranged DPS and sometimes the healers can get into range and get that inoculation. Because if you don't get it, you're pretty much dead. That's all that fight really is. It's also got a pretty hard enrage on it as well, so there is a DPS check on it, but we didn't fail that DPS check at all. And we screwed up the... I suppose you would call it the execution in terms of the spores a couple of times, and that really causes a few problems. People didn't really realise what the spores were all about, and that you couldn't just stand in the big group and get the spore inoculation debuff. It didn't work that way. But, yeah, eventually we killed it. It's not as impressive as Rotface, honestly. I think Rotface is a very nicely balanced and challenging encounter, and I've heard it's pretty good in hard mode as well. Festiga, on the other hand, it's a check encounter. It's a DPS check, it's a healing check, and, of course, it's a stupidity check. So, Putricide. I think, to be honest, I heard too much about Putricide, and as a result, I was actually disappointed in what Putricide had to offer. No, really, I'm not kidding. So, Putricide offered this amazing encounter, so people said. It had amazing, funny voice acting, and it was really hard and challenging, and blah, blah, blah. And I suppose maybe it is quite hard in 25-man, but we only tried it like 3 times before killing him, honestly. I didn't really see what was so difficult about that fight. You had a little bit of vehicle in there, as in your off-tank controls an abomination that eats slime pools on the ground. So think a little bit of Lord Malchezaar. Indeed, you do not face putricide alone, but the slime that I command. Something along those lines. He spawns a bunch of slime all over the room. The slime pools get progressively bigger. You've got to control the abomination to eat the slime. By eating a certain amount of slime, you can do a slowing debuff on the ads that he spawns. These ads can be really nasty. They generally move towards a target and do horrendous damage if they reach him. One of them explodes and does AoE damage based on how many people are around the person in question. So if there's no one there, they're basically dead. It's a one-shot kill. But you can reduce the damage quite considerably by moving in. So there's no other way to slow these things down. You've got to debuff them, and they will freeze the target so that you can't really get away so easily. Unless you have certain ways of doing so, like Blink gets out of it, Ice Block, things like that. Whereas the other ads, they're called gas clouds, and they do damage and things like that. So I think actually what was most intriguing about the fight, other than the rather amusing voice acting, was once he got into Phase 2, he started throwing what was called malleable goo. Now this stuff arcs through the air, and raid warnings don't say malleable goo on you. They generally say malleable goo near you. And again, it's another visual thing. You see this potion spiraling through the air with goo flying all over the place, and you've got to get the hell out of the way, because if you get hit by this, you're boned. It's like a 300... Obviously, it can't be a 300% decrease in casting speed. That would be absurd, but it's a massive decrease in casting speed. 300% longer duration in casting speed. I knew I'd seen that number somewhere. And that will screw you over really well. If a healer gets that, you're basically dead. A lot of damage involved in that fight, a lot of movement as well. And in Phase 3, it's a massive DPS race because the abomination, you can't be used anymore to eat slime, and a lot more gets spawned. So, Malchezaar style, the entire room gets completely covered. It's a pretty decent fight. It's not what I would call groundbreaking in any way. It's solid. Yeah, it's a good encounter. It's not below average. It's not really above average. It's just kind of cool. And yeah, it's got some funny voice acting, and there are encounters that benefit an awful lot from that. XT002 is still, to me, absolutely hilarious. Mimiron, to some degree, is absolutely hilarious. I don't really know about Putricide. I think because I'd heard so much about it, the jokes were not effective. And honestly, the voice acting wasn't that great anyway. You know, really. I heard things like that at the start of Phase 2. He says, like, some tentacles come out of his shoulders. He's like, huh? Where'd these come from? Right, well, there's no enthusiasm behind that, and I don't suppose it was all that great, but the fight itself is good, and I've heard that the hard mode is an absolute nightmare to deal with, so I'm definitely looking forward to cracking my head up against that one. As of now, I believe only 6 or so guilds have actually killed it in hard mode. That's on 25 man, so that's extremely interesting. Those look to be the two big hurdle encounters in the hard mode, the Putricide encounter and the Lich King. We'll see how that one goes. I'm looking forward to giving it a crack. Now that we're beating Putricide, I think we'll be fine up until Syndragoza. We might wipe on Syndragoza a little bit, and then we'll be talking about the Lich King, and then getting into some hard modes. Oh yes, there's some good stuff. Thus far, though, ICC is pretty solid. I must say, I haven't seen any of those dailies yet, those random dailies that appear. Actually, weeklies, what am I talking about? These weekly repeatable quests that apparently can give you some bonus frost badges. They can spawn in various areas of the dungeon. Haven't seen one yet. Just bad luck more so than anything else. But hey, otherwise, it's pretty good. The loot's good, the bosses are... They vary from boss to boss, really. Some of those are really good. I think Festigut was probably the weakest of the three. Rotface is still my favourite encounter in there, and Putricide is good for novelty, but I think it's going to get very stale very fast, whereas you've always really got to be awake on Rotface, and maybe not quite as much on Putricide, at least in 10-man mode. My name is TotalBiscuit, you are listening to Blue Plz here on CynicalBrit.com. The illusion of choice, ladies and gentlemen, is coming up after this. Yes, indeed. Email your questions for the illusion of choice, themurloc@gmail.com. Pick the last topic of the show, and then after a brief break, we'll do some Zerg Please. I have to download the patch, and then we can do some Zerg Please commentary. Yes, live audio commentary here on CynicalBrit.com, and I'll be providing the replay file. Yes, the replay file at the end of the show, and when the podcast comes out, so that you can watch along. I'll be right back after this, folks. Enjoy. You are listening to the podcast, an archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed to comply with copyright law. If you'd like to hear the music, tune into the live stream on Fridays at 8 p.m. GMT. That's 3 p.m. EST, only on CynicalBrit.com. You are listening to Blue Plz here on CynicalBrit.com. It's the illusion of choice. Well, I'm a vandal when it comes to these windows. Right, it's your chance to contribute to the show, folks. We've got some great emails here, and I'm going to choose one. And yes, at the end of the show, we will not only be doing Zerg Please, my first placement match in the leagues, folks. See how I've improved. And those asking about the videos, right, here's how it goes, right. We've got Zerg Please, which is audio commentary, and we've got I Suck at StarCraft 2. I Suck at StarCraft 2 is more of a documentary than it is commentary. Yeah? You'll notice that I don't use the same style of shoutcasting as, say, I did on the winning entry for the Shoutcast Contest 2009, as sponsored by Blizzard Entertainment. You know, I don't use the same style of commentary for that. Obviously, because I'm talking in an analytical sense about everything I did wrong. So, they're two very different things. Now, this placement match, all of the replays with StarCraft 2 actually get recorded, right? So this placement match will also get recorded. Now, what that means is, in the long run, you will get to see this. However, it's going to take a little bit of time in order for that to happen. Right? So, I wouldn't get too stressed out about it. What I will do is release a replay file. And yes, if you are not in the beta, you can watch replays at the moment. There is a way to do it. Just Google the instructions. I believe it involves something about just dragging the replay file onto StarCraft 2, and it'll automatically launch and it will let you watch it. So what I'll do is I'll do in the style of all of the old replays that have been done for Warcraft 3 and StarCraft, just a shoutcasted audio replay. I'll provide Zerg Please for you. You'll be able to sync it up with your replay, and you'll be able to watch the replay as I do the commentary, and then you can look at whatever you want. That sounds like a reasonable way to do it. I don't want to put out a video of this yet, just because I'm trying to do a series of me getting progressively better. And this match right here is about 10 matches ahead of what's up on YouTube, so I'm sure you can understand. Anyway, the illusion of choice, ladies and gentlemen. If I am lagging right now, I certainly hope not. I'm actually trying to patch StarCraft 2, because a patch came out effectively during the show, and I wasn't able to get everything sorted out for that. It does still use that bloody BitTorrent client, so I am really, really hoping that it's not lagging my shoutcasting right now, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, illusion of choice time. Yes, indeed. This is an interesting one. Yes, I'll just briefly mention this because this is ridiculous. I was wondering if you heard of the Rawcast versus WoW.com situation. Apparently, WoW.com accused Stomp and Halfrot of being rumor mongers after saying on their show that they heard from a reputable source that Blizzard would be taking their TCG in-house. Of course, after the story was found out to be true, WoW.com posted their story on it and left out the fact that Rawcast's been right without any sort of apology for their slander. Yeah, don't even get me started on WoW.com, man. Seriously, WoW.com are the biggest rumor mongers in the entire freaking community. Yellow journalism comes naturally to them. Remember they were the guys that were perpetuating this absurd story without any evidence to back it up at all, that the authenticator was hackable, and that the authenticator didn't make your account secure. And you know what? All that does is rabble-rouse and scares the hell out of people. It's yellow journalism. It's all it is. It's nonsense. And yeah, WoW.com is the biggest freaking rumor mill. They were not the only person to post this. You know, Rawcast came up with something that the MMO Champion came up with. It probably came from the same damn source. So WoW.com got upset that they didn't scoop the information. Let's see how many times WoW.com's been wrong lately. Very wrong. They're, you know, almost everything, their big exclusives and supposed leaks of it turned out to be false. It's nonsense. They can't be trusted. So, you know, screw WoW.com, quite frankly. I know for a fact that Rawcast has a source that is reputable. I also know for a fact that MMO Champion has a source that is reputable. So, don't get me started on WoW.com's rumor milling. They make up more crap than anyone else in the WoW community. And you should take everything they post with a gigantic pillar of salt, which I must say, quite frankly, I would hope that a few of them turn into when they hear this damn podcast. They probably have some kind of instruction where it's like, don't listen to TotalBiscuit, otherwise something terrible will happen to you, and your self-esteem. I mean, about half the staff on there actually write good stuff, and then there's just a choice few of them that are absolutely awful, and they need to just stop posting, in general. Anyway, yeah, there you go. Little rant, you wanted it, you asked for it. You've got it. Right, let's do a real illusion of choice. This one comes from Demargus. He's from EU Frostmon. He has this to say. Hey, numbnuts. Well, that's not very nice, is it? He asked me, why is it that you like people getting a tad abusive? Mainly because I hate sycophancy. So, yeah, there you go. Right, here's his question. I'd like to hear your take on the current status of the game content surrounding actual raid content, i.e. farming for consumables, attunements, rep grinding and resistance gear. In Wrath of the Lich King, we've seen a rather drastic overhaul of the things that players sometimes had to do in order to be able to raid. It's pretty much down to the instances alone, the enchanting, the gems, and the min-maxing surrounding it. They're all being somewhat straightforward now, with farming not being much of an issue. The willingness to grind was one of the areas of the game, of course, where the distinction between casual and hardcore really came into play. And today you will see people turning into alcoholics and achievement whores and getting their grind on that way. Do you think that this development is nothing but positive as you play for the content and shouldn't have to put in work into being able to go there, or at least in order to get something done in raids? Or should aspects of this be restrained, for example, in heroic modes? Right, okay. It's an interesting question. I think, honestly, that the lion's share of the judgment as to whether or not you are good at the game should be your skill. How well you play. I railed against attunements for a long time. I offer no apologies for that at all. Because I was right. It's as simple as that. I was absolutely right on that one. You want to know why I was right? Because nobody should be kept out of an instance simply on the basis of doing an unrelated quest, or doing a previous instance. The only baseline that you should have to meet is the skill required to beat the fight, and that is it. That's all. That's all you should need. Blizzard evidently agrees. There you go. Although, having said that, they've gone back on that a little bit lately with the hard modes, which, I disagree. Why should you have to beat everything in order to get to the hard modes? Why can't you just start on the hard modes if you feel like it? Yeah, I know it's going to be incredibly hard, and you might not be geared for it, but that's your decision. That's your raid's decision. There are some guilds that would like to do that, especially with the unlocking nonsense that was going on with ICC. Right, so flasks, things like that. Flasks are weird because back in the day, flasks were expensive, they were more powerful than they are right now, and they were considered to be the domain of the hardcore. Right now, they've become standard. And you know what's weird about that? They became standard, and as a result, why do they even exist? Why don't you just buff every class the amount that a flask costs? Or at least in terms of how much it provides. So say I get 65 or whatever extra damage, I can't even remember, from the Flask of the Frostworm. So why don't you... Actually, it's not 65, is it? Wow, that was like the Flask of Supreme Power or something. Oh, I'm living in the past, folks. Whatever. Why don't you just give all casters that extra spell power as a passive? Why not? Is it the cost factor? Should people have to buy these flasks in order to reach a certain level of play? What purpose does it serve? Well, I suppose one could argue that if you didn't have flasks, then alchemy would be freaking terrible. Consumables in general. But they've nerfed consumables so much that selling potions, for instance, is just... It barely happens. 1 mana potion per fight, big deal. Barely makes a difference with refreshment these days. Back in the day, you had encounters balanced around the fact that people could chug multiple pots. That's no longer the case. There's no point in using elixirs anymore. They don't stack. So it's flask or nothing. It's weird. It's a really, really weird situation. It's one of those things that I think is a relic of bygone raiding days, and they kept it in there just for the sake of keeping it in there. Why is it even there, honestly? One has to wonder, honestly, why it's still there at all, and what purpose it serves. I suppose it's just that little barrier to entry. It's kind of the same as repair costs. One wonders why that's there. Well, there's a difference between repair costs and the alchemy flasks. Well, repair costs, they're a money sink, yeah? They're a penalty for death. Flasks, they're neither of those things. They're not a money sink. They don't make money disappear from the economy. They just go to somebody else who makes them. It's obviously a vital part of a profession, and I think they can't get rid of it now, because if they did, they'd break the prof. Let's be honest. I mean, they've already broken the prof quite a lot. Alchemy's pretty bad in the grand scheme of things in terms of wrath. But I suppose I understand why it's still there. I suppose it kind of makes sense why it's still there, just because you can't really get rid of it. I think they'll probably revamp it somewhat, but it makes me wonder, why should someone pay extra money just to do raiding? And the answer, of course, is going to be, well, they don't have to. They don't need a flask. But, of course, it's guild standard for anyone that doesn't suck to bring a flask and, of course, to bring a fish feast and things like that. I suppose one can derive value from giving the choice to a group of players as to whether or not they really want to go all out. It's the measure of a guild, the measure of a group, the measure of a pug. If people are willing to sink money into it, maybe it's kind of a psychological thing. I sunk money into this raid, so I'm going to try harder to justify my investment. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? There's a psychological reason for keeping flasks, keeping fish feasts in the game. I used money. I spent money. It's the same as the deterrent, yeah? Not only is it a money sink, but it's a deterrent from dying, repair costs. So, you don't want to die because it's going to cost you money. And you want to do the best because you have spent money, you have invested. Yeah? You've spent money on your flasks, you've spent money on your fish feasts. The guild has spent money, and is spending time. So maybe that helps guilds, and even pugs, push harder and be better. Maybe. It's possible, isn't it, guys? You know, is that entirely out of the realms of possibility? I don't think so. The grind itself, yeah, has absolutely dissipated, and I really don't miss farming elemental earth. I don't. Come to the Cthulhu raid. We have many things, including the ability to waste major nature resistance potions. Oh, man, I still have a stack of those in my bank. It's a reminder of bygone ages. Does anyone really think that was a good thing? Honestly? No, I don't think it was at all. I think it was absolutely bloody abysmal. There you go. There you go. Not something I miss, honestly. Overall, I would say that the removal of the grind has been a relatively good thing. You still have to work, but not very hard. You just need to do a couple of dailies. And I think the two major aspects to consider are the fact that you can't get rid of flasks, because if you do, alchemy's broken. Even more so than it already is. And you provide this kind of incentive, this investment. If the player invests in something and they have to spend money, they will naturally try harder in order to fulfill the goal so as not to waste their own cash. It's a powerful motivator, folks. That's my argument. And that was TotalBiscuit's Psychology 101 as applied to raiding and flasks. There you go. I think we're about done here, folks. Now, I'm still downloading this StarCraft patch. It might take a little while, so I'll do some music in the meantime. I'm going to try and keep you entertained. We're going to just keep going all night long here on Blue Plz. And it'll also give me a chance to get something to eat, and then we can do some Zerg, please. Shout-out time, folks. Get them in. Get them in to themaillook@gmail.com, or PM me on IRC, or tweet me if you wish. Twitter.com/TotalBiscuit. There you go. Do it! Do it now! Absolutely. Get your shout-outs in. And a quick reminder, of course, contest, folks. Review Blue Plz. Be honest. I'm not asking for sycophancy. I hate that. I'm not asking for dishonesty. I want your honest opinion of this show. Put it in there. It's great feedback for us. It helps promote the show. It gives us ranking on iTunes. It's really good. Take a screenshot of your review. Email it. It doesn't matter what language it's in. You can do it in Swedish, Norwegian, Swahili, whatever the hell you like, on your appropriate iTunes region. Email screenshot to me. Just a print screen with Microsoft Paint or whatever, and email it to themaillook@gmail.com. You have 1 week. I'll announce the winner of the StarCraft 2 beta key next week, and we're hoping to have a bunch more stuff to give away as well. So keep an eye on the website for information on future giveaways, interviews, and all good stuff. Actually got a post up right there right now called State of Play. Tells you all about what's going on in the next couple of weeks on the website. Lots of stuff there, cynicalbrit.com. Go check it out. Even if you're an iTunes listener, there is additional content there for you to have a look at. Shout-out times, as promised. So, here's one from Lil Rex, and he says, you have 2 new listeners I brought to you today. So can I get a shout-out to Lectro and Uno of Carpe Noctem? Seize the night, I assume. Ah, yes, Latin. On Sengen US. There you go. Absolutely, you can have a shout-out, Lil Rex. A shout-out to me for upgrading from Windows Vista to Windows 7. Oh, the joy! Ah, yes, absolutely fantastic. That's from Ragavale from Doomhammer EU. A shout-out to Zulkin's grandparents for returning home from their usual winter vacation in Florida and returning to a foot of snow. Yeah, I heard you guys are getting really bad over there. We just got a lot of rain today. Can I get a shout-out to Avanara? Yes, you can, Holly. There you go. And a shout-out to Doom Extreme, because he's gone on the path for the greater good. Yes, he has. He earned my respect today. It's very, very rare that someone like that is able to earn my respect after earning my disrespect and ire early on. Well done, Doom Extreme. Continue to DPS, and we will be proud of you. A shout-out to Nymph for finally managing to listen to your show again. Congratulations. There you go. A shout out to Saracen, who is win at Peggle, so he claims. I have not seen the empirical evidence. A shout out to Baleman, just for the sake of having one. A shout out to let's try again. Shizura on Thunderhorn EU. Shout out to Strange Brew Alliance on Eve, and more specifically, the 82nd All-Americans. Get our damn Rockwell in the wormhole. Possibly in the mountains, in fact. Yes, in the mountains. Where the hell's my dropping gone? Oh, it's disappeared. Whatever. I'll do it myself. In the mountains. Yeah, I'm getting good at that. I practice. A shout out to OMG, it's Jay. Oh, OMG, it is Jay. There you go. Apparently, it is Jay, and there is OMG involved in this. Right, ladies and gents, we're about done. I promised you last week a parody song. Do I ever break my promises? No, I don't, ladies and gentlemen. Check out the rest of the shows on cynicalbrit.com. Enter the contest. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back after this and possibly a few more songs with some Zerg Please audio commentary for StarCraft 2, my first ever placement match. This is a Rage Against the Machine parody. It's called Standing in the Fire. Good night. This should be a familiar story to some of you. Have you ever had that one healer that you just can't get rid of? Maybe he's the GM and he just keeps screwing up. But healers are in short supply, so you've got to keep him right. Well, yeah! Repairs on my expense. The cost of being dire. The guild blessed me with a raid spot. Yet I ran into the fire. So make your list and heart to town for fish feast that we'll need. I'll fail and squander your commitment. Need where the rest will breed. Set my tune to autofollow, condemn you to your grave. We're stuck inside of Old War, the Leviathan of Flame. Hey, I'm standing in the fire. Hey, standing in my the fire. My tactics make no sense, but loot is my desire. The party asked me that in future I stay out of the fire. Why I'm the leader, the healer, the epic loot stealer, a loose cannon disc priest. I'm always getting feared. Nothing rhymes with orange. The guy that's gonna blame ya, a bad compulsive liar, while standing in the fire. Hey, I'm standing in the fire. Hey, I'm standing in the fire. I am the bane of this guild, but boss and GM still. There is no other priest to take, so raid with the one that makes you fail. I am the leader, the healer, the epic loot stealer, the loose cannon disc priest, the spammer of my seer. When I speak, you will cringe, the priest that will not heal ya. I'm toasting my attire by standing in a fire. Honestly, guys, I don't know what your problem is. Really. I'm the GM. You've got to accept that. Where else are you going to find a healer? From Guild X? Hell no. No one's leaving there. They're showered in epics. Yeah, I'm standing in the fire. Standing in the fire. You see me standing in the fire. Standing in the fire. You have been listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz, WoW's #1 shock jock show, only on cynicalbrit.com. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment on the Cynical Brit website or write a review of the show on iTunes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.